also covered this issue on one of my previous shows, so for more information on this time please refer to my MISC Q&A Round 5 podcast. September 25th. In a historic ruling of Saudi Arabian politics, King Abdullah grants women the right to vote and run for office in future elections. However, the new ruling will not go into effect until the next election cycle in 2015. September 27th. In an outbreak of listeria in 20 states of the US, claiming the lives of 18 people, Cantaloupe from Jensen Farms, a Colorado company, is revealed as the source. Now we're done with September, on to October now. As inspired by the occupation in Wall Street, similar occupations have now sprung up in almost every country on the planet. Today, at the time of this recording, there are over 2,600 occupations worldwide. As with my previous mention of the Occupy movement, please refer to my MISC Q&A Round 5 podcast for more information on that. Okay, moving on. October 19th. In reaction to the Parliament's pending vote to approve new austerity measures as a means of rescue funding, which cut pensions and wages as well as thousands of public sector redundancies, tens of thousands begin the first day of a 2-day general strike in Greece, escalating the scale of the existing demonstrations. October 20th. Libya's interim government announces that Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi has been killed by rebel troops in Sirte. Initial reports are decidedly unclear on the cause of death. However, camera phone footage of Gaddafi's beating and execution go viral on the internet. October 23rd. Libya officially declares its liberation and begins the process of electing a government and creating a constitution. Also, on October 23rd, a 7.2 magnitude earthquake hits Van province in Turkey, near the border of Iran, killing more than 360 people, injuring 1,300 and collapsing 2,260 buildings. Aid is offered by over 50 countries, including Israel, despite strained relations between them. October 24th. In a momentous turn of events, millions of Tunisians vote for an assembly to write a constitution and shape a new government in their first ever free election. Winning the vote with 41% is Ennahda, a moderate Islamic party. October 26th. A package to bring the Eurozone debt crisis under control has been agreed on by Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany and President Nicolas Sarkozy of France. The terms include forcing banks to take a 50% cut in the value of Greek debt and to raise new capital to protect them from future defaults, increasing the Eurozone's bailout fund to $1.4 trillion. Additional austerity measures include a reduction of Greece's debt to 120% of its GDP by 2020. However, Greek citizens and politicians have expressed opposition to such interference with Greek finances. October 31st. In an effort to subdue protesters and rescue his political standing, Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou announces that there will be a public vote on the proposed austerity measures. Now we're done with October, now on to November. November 9th. In a deeply ominous decision, the UK Treasury have handed over the running of Hitchinbrook Hospital in Cambridgeshire, dubbed by the government as a failing NHS hospital, to Circle, a private healthcare company. Although certain private corporations already do manage elements of the NHS, such as treatment centres which perform hip replacements, this is the first entire hospital to be taken over by a private company, and speculation points to 20 other hospitals in numerous NHS trusts being subjected to the same fate, casting a shadow over the longevity of the NHS as a whole and potentially putting an end to socialised or in other words, free healthcare in the UK. November 18th. In a demonstration to demand the ruling military council step down in favour of a civilian-led government, protesters representing both Islamists and liberal opposition have returned to Tahrir Square in Egypt. However, violence broke out when police began firing on crowds with rubber bullets and tear gas. November 21st. Despite more than 10 weeks of meetings, the US Congressional Committee in charge of finding $1.2 trillion in deficit reductions failed to agree on what programs to cut. As a result, automatic cuts to military and domestic programs will go into effect in 2013. Also on November 21st, as the Egyptian protests grow and police are widely condemned for their unreasonable force and violence, the cabinet decides to resign. In an agreement reached with the Muslim Brotherhood, the military council promises to hold presidential elections by June 2012, installing a civilian prime minister and thus accelerating the transition to a civilian government. Now we're done with November, now on to the current month of December the 2nd. As the folly of spiralling debts sinks in with the European bankers, Bank of England Governor Sir Mervyn King has told banks to, and I quote, get ready for a Eurozone collapse. End quote. 5 virtually bankrupt Eurozone economies, being Greece, Portugal, Italy, Spain and Ireland, are said to owe UK banks nearly £200 billion. However, with the skyrocketing UK debts in excess of £100 trillion, around 430% of GDP, the house of cards does not look stable from any perspective. And my last news story for the global scope, December 4th, a 2.2 magnitude tremor hit the Bodmin region of Cornwall. There have fortunately been no reports of harm or damage. Right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my review of the world news for the year 2011. And you know what? I actually feel inclined to apologise for how grim it all sounds. I tried my best to include as many positive stories that had a momentous and or global scope. However, there doesn't appear to be many of them for this year, But I must also apologise if there was anything that I've missed here. I do apologise. I tried to do the best I could with what I could find. But looking back on the kind of year we've had, the Chinese phrase, or at least I think it's a Chinese phrase, we live in interesting times, certainly does seem to apply, doesn't it? So you can see that there's a lot of trouble brewing on virtually every front here. We have escalating and more numerable natural disasters, national debt defaults, and a huge amount of quote-unquote corruption playing a huge part in societal and governmental and financial operation. However, as we all know in the movement, and as I hope all of you listening can tell, that is how the current socio-economic system functions. Corruption, in its widely known definition, doesn't actually exist when we consider our current system, because corruption is the system. Really, the only way corruption can exist when you place it in the context of anything is when you consider the natural order of our biosphere. We are the only species on the planet that places self-imposed debts and the task of acquisition of money in order to orient our lives and keep surviving. However, as you can probably tell, that is one of the main reasons why the modern human being, being the capitalistic human being, is completely dysfunctional and ultimately unsustainable. You only need to look at the details of the current Eurozone debt crisis to see the inherent flaw of our current system. I mean, come on, how many times do we have to raise the debt ceiling and push ourselves closer and closer to a total global debt default before we realise and recognise the gravity of the situation? How much debt do we have to rack up before it gets comically tragic and blatant to any outsider of the situation to think that we should just do away with debt altogether? That's one of the main reasons, I guess, why we need to move out of this system of money altogether. Yeah, instead of perpetually quibbling about how much will this cost, how about we start thinking about it in terms of, can we technically do it? Because that is the real beauty of the train of thought we advocate in regards to the transition to a resource-based economic model. Instead of arguing about infantile budget considerations, we think to ourselves, do we have the technological capability? Do we have the brain power? And do we have the resources? And you know what? The answer to all three of those questions is a huge resounding yes. So why haven't we done that yet? Why haven't we taken that humane, logical and next progressive step? Oh yeah, I remember. Money. We don't have the money for that. Well, you know what I say to that? I tell you what, pardon my French here, but you know, I'm forced to use this kind of language. Fuck the money. We need to do what is right for all humankind. Fuck how much it will cost, because that's just a complete and utter misnomer. It's a contrived notion that has no basis in physical reality. Why the hell are we still consumed with this ridiculous question when we have the technology to put people on different planets? And the one thing that is holding all of us back is money. We're held back because we have stuck ourselves in a trap of having to continually keep worthless pieces of paper, or in reality, numbers on a computer screen, moving from one place to another so we can keep GDP up and keep this childish and destructive game in play while we hoard as much stuff and temporal debt coupons, as my friend James Phillips calls them, and all the while the human spirit and population withers away more and more as a result. As far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure all of you in your heart of hearts should agree, we only have two choices. Number one, keep the current system as it is and keep raising the debt ceiling again and again and again and again until either we run out of the finite resources of this planet that are crucial to our survival, or the inevitable debt collapse brings down absolutely everything, or number two, we stop this game right here, right now. We begin a complete overhaul after initiating a complete and unequivocal universal debt forgiveness gesture. But not only do we wipe the debt slate clean, we keep it clean. Just like in the parable described by Peter Joseph in his debt crisis presentation for one of the recent LA town hall meetings, you can find it on YouTube, we recognise how unsustainable such a cancerous growth model is, and while, as embarrassing as it may be to do so, forgive all debts and vow never to allow this circus of a system to ever happen again. And from there, look at what we can technically do when we consider the wonderful gift technology can provide in liberating mankind from having to work to survive, so we can instead work together to truly live. Because when all is said and done, this current system only works for you if you are part of the richest 1%. And what about all the rest of us who have to scrimp and save just in order to make a living? What good is this system doing us? This current system is a complete insult to our intelligence, to our hearts and minds, our biology and our lives. We are human beings. We are so much more than this. We are